The wind howled through the streets of Washington, D.C., sharp as a bayonet, slicing through John Jack Sullivan's threadbare navy peacoat. At 82, Jack's frame was slight. His shoulders stooped from years of carrying the weight of wars long past. His hands, gnarled and trembling from age and old wounds, clutched a carefully folded American flag against his chest. It wasn't just any flag. It had draped his brother's casket after Fallujah, a tangible piece of a sacrifice Jack still carried like a shadow. Today, December 7th, 2024, was Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, and the National Veterans Memorial was hosting its annual tribute, a grand event promising free entry to all who'd served. Jack had marked the date in red ink on his kitchen calendar, a ritual he'd kept for years, his anticipation building like a soldier awaiting orders. Jack didn't drive anymore. His vision had faded, his reflexes dulled, but his mind was a steel trap, preserving every detail of his service. Gulf War in 91, Afghanistan in 2003. The scars on his body from shrapnel and burns were matched only by the memories etched into his soul. He'd risen at 4 a.m., polishing his old service boots until they gleamed faintly in the dim light of his one-bedroom apartment. His bronze star, pinned to his coat, caught the dawn's glow as he checked himself in a cracked mirror. His daughter Emily had offered to drive him from her home in Arlington, but Jack waved her off with a gentle smile. "You've got the kids to wrangle," he'd said. Truth was, this journey felt sacred, a pilgrimage he needed to make alone. The trip to the memorial required 2 buses and a slow walk through the icy Capitol streets. Jack timed it with the precision of a man who'd once coordinated supply drops under fire. As he approached the memorial's entrance, its granite pillars loomed like sentinels, banners snapping in the wind. "Honoring our heroes, a tribute to service." Families milled about, their chatter bright with excitement. Younger veterans, in crisp uniforms or branded VA jackets, flashed IDs and received nods from the security guard. A young guy, maybe 25, with a buzz cut and a bored smirk, Jack shuffled forward, his breath visible in the cold, and offered a warm, "Morning, son." "ID," the guard snapped, eyes barely lifting from his clipboard. Jack's smile held steady. "Served in Desert Storm in Afghanistan, son. SEAL Team 3, then logistics in Kandahar." He reached into his coat, pulling out a faded photograph. Himself, young and square-jawed, standing with his unit in Kuwait, dust clinging to their gear. "This is me, back in 91. The guard glanced at the photo, then at Jack's weathered face, his trembling hands, the worn coat. "Sir, we need proper ID. Military card, VA card, discharge papers. Can't just take your word for it." His tone was flat, dismissive. Jack nodded slowly. "I haven't had an ID in years, son. Lost most of my papers in a house fire back in '08. But I brought this." He gestured to the bronze star, its ribbon frayed but proud, and the photograph, creased but clear. The guard didn't even look. Could be anybody's. "Rules are rules. No ID, no entry." He waved Jack aside, already eyeing the next person in line. A woman in a sleek fur coat nearby muttered, "Always some old guy trying to scam a free ticket." A few others snickered, their breath puffing in the cold air. A teenager in a hoodie smirked, whispering to his friend, "Bet he's just here for the free coffee." Jack's face didn't change. Pride kept his spine straight, though the wind seemed to cut deeper now. He stepped back, saying nothing. No protests, no scene, just a quiet dignity as he turned away, descending the memorial steps. The flag in his hands felt heavier, its folds a shield against more than just the December chill. It was the flag from his brother Tommy's funeral, a Marine who'd never made it home from Iraq. Jack held it tighter, protecting it from the indifference around him. He didn't see the woman across the street, her tailored coat and sharp eyes marking her as someone who missed nothing. She'd watched the whole exchange, her phone already at her ear, her voice low but urgent. "You're not going to believe what I just saw," she said, her words clipped with anger. Inside the memorial, the ceremony began with polished pomp. The director, a man in a crisp suit, delivered a speech about sacrifice and valor, his words echoing off the marble walls. A choir of school kids sang Sweet Caroline, a nod to American spirit. Screens played slick videos of young, photogenic veterans sharing stories, interspersed with black and white footage of D-Day and Iwo Jima. Today, we honor those who stood tall for freedom, the director declared, earning warm applause. The crowd, cozy in their coats, nodded along, basking in the glow of patriotic pride. Aside, Jack sat on a bench across the plaza, the cold seeping into his bones. The flag rested in his lap, a lifeline to Tommy, to comrades lost in deserts and mountains, to a version of himself the world no longer seemed to see. He wasn't angry. Anger had burned out years ago, replaced by a quiet resignation. America loved its heroes in speeches and movies, but men like him, weathered and worn, didn't fit the glossy image. He was too old, too frail, too inconvenient for their celebration. The irony stung, but he'd felt it before, on street corners and VA waiting rooms, in the way people's eyes slid past him. Across town, in a Pentagon office, Colonel Rachel Harper moved with purpose, her boots clicking on the polished floor. A 25-year Army veteran, Rachel had no patience for nonsense, especially when it came to those who'd served. She knocked once on a heavy door and entered without waiting. "General, we've got a problem at the Veterans Memorial," she said, her voice steady but tight. General David Coleman, 60, looked up from his desk, 3 stars gleaming on his uniform. A decorated commander with tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, Coleman was known for his loyalty to his troops, past and present. "What kind of problem, Colonel?" "I saw a vet get turned away at the tribute ceremony. Older guy, Gulf and Afghanistan service by his insignia. Security dismissed him for not having ID. The crowd mocked him." Rachel's jaw tightened. "It was ugly, sir." Coleman's eyes narrowed. "Details." She laid it out. Jack's quiet dignity, the guard's arrogance, the bystander's cruelty. Coleman leaned back, his fingers drumming the desk. "You get a name?" "John Sullivan. I ran a check. SEAL Team 3, Gulf War. Later served in Afghanistan logistics. Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart." She slid a file across his desk. Coleman opened it, his expression shifting. "Sullivan? John Sullivan?" He paused, a memory surfacing. "My uncle served with a Sullivan in Kuwait. Said he pulled 2 men from a downed chopper under fire, took shrapnel to the leg doing it." He stood, his voice hard. "Clear my schedule, get my car ready. This just got personal." Back at the memorial, Jack stared at the distant banners, their words about honor feeling hollow. The bus was late, or maybe he'd missed it, lost in thoughts of Tommy and the men he'd buried. He didn't notice the black SUVs pulling up, their doors opening with military precision. But he did hear the boots, crisp, deliberate, the sound of a soldier on the move. And as a young officer approached, saluting sharply, Jack Sullivan's story was about to change. The marble halls of the National Veterans Memorial vibrated with the hum of ceremony. Patriotic songs, polished speeches, and the clink of glasses as attendees toasted to heroes. Outside, the December wind bit harder, but inside the air was warm with self-congratulation. That warmth shattered when the heavy doors swung open and General David Coleman strode in, his 3-star insignia gleaming like a warning. His boots echoed with purpose, each step a drumbeat of reckoning. Behind him, Colonel Rachel Harper followed, her face set in quiet fury, and a small retinue of officers trailed, their uniforms crisp against the civilian crowd. The security guard, the same one who'd dismissed Jack Sullivan an hour earlier, froze mid-sentence, his clipboard clattering to the floor. "Where is he?" General Coleman's voice cut through the noise like a mortar round. The guard blinked, his smirk gone, replaced by a flicker of fear. "Sir, You told him he didn't belong here," Coleman quoted, his tone low but lethal, each word landing like a blow. "This is for real veterans." "It's what you said to a man who risked his life for this country, isn't it?" The crowd parted, murmurs rippling as phone cameras rose, capturing the confrontation. The guard stammered, I was just following protocol, sir. No ID, no entry." "Protocol?" Coleman's voice rose, sharp with contempt. He turned to the museum director, a man in a tailored suit who'd been basking in the glow of his own speech moments ago. You call this honoring veterans? You let your staff turn away a hero at your gates while you stand here preaching about sacrifice? The director, Mr. Edward Langley, paled, his hands fidgeting. General Coleman, sir, there must be a misunderstanding. We require proper identification. Coleman interrupted, stepping closer, his presence towering. Let me tell you about John Sullivan's identification. His ID is the shrapnel still lodged in his leg from Kuwait. It's the burns on his hands from pulling men out of a burning chopper in Afghanistan. It's the bronze star pinned to his coat, the one you didn't even bother to look at. He turned to the crowd, his voice booming across the hall. You had a man nominated for the Medal of Honor standing on your steps, and you slammed the door in his face? A collective gasp swept through the room. Families clutched their programs, veterans in the crowd straightened, and reporters edged closer, sensing a story that would burn through the airwaves. Coleman's eyes blazed as he continued, his voice cracking with emotion. John Sullivan saved my uncle's life in Desert Storm. September 12, 1991, he dragged him from a downed Black Hawk while bullets tore through the air, taking shrapnel to his own body. My family exists because of that man. And you, he pointed at the guard, then the director, you told him he wasn't a real veteran. The director's face was ashen. General, I had no idea. You'd had no idea because you've turned this into a photo op. Pullman snapped. You celebrate veterans who fit your glossy brochures. Young, polished, camera-ready. But men like Jack? Men with scars and trembling hands who carry their brothers' flags instead of credentials? You don't see them. You don't want to. His voice softened, but the weight of it grew heavier. Jack Sullivan gave his medals, Silver Star, Purple Heart, to his brother's widow after Fallujah. Said Tommy was the real hero. That's the man you turned away. The hall was silent. The choir's last note long faded. A woman in the crowd wiped her eyes, her hands shaking. A young veteran, his own medals pinned to his chest, bowed his head, fists clenched. Outside, across the plaza, Jack sat on his bench, unaware of the storm brewing inside. The flag in his hands was his anchor, its folds worn from years of quiet vigils. He didn't hear the rapid footsteps approaching until a young officer stopped before him, snapping a salute so sharp it seemed to cut the air. Mr. Sullivan, sir, General Coleman requests your presence. Jack blinked, his weathered face creasing in confusion. Coleman? David Coleman? A faint memory stirred. His uncle, a wiry lieutenant he'd pulled from that chopper, talking about his nephew, a kid with big dreams. Well, I'll be, Jack murmured, a small smile breaking through. The officer helped him to his feet, steadying his trembling frame as they crossed the plaza. A crowd had gathered at the memorial's entrance, drawn by the flashing lights of the SUVs and the buzz of something big unfolding. As Jack climbed the steps, General Coleman emerged, his uniform immaculate, his eyes locking onto Jack's with a mix of gratitude and fury. Chief Petty Officer Sullivan, Coleman said, his voice carrying the weight of command as he rendered a slow, deliberate salute. I'm David Coleman. My uncle was Lieutenant Robert Coleman, SEAL Team 3. You saved his life. In Kuwait. The crowd stilled, phones still recording but hands lowering as the moment sank in. Jack's eyes widened, recognition dawning. Bobby's nephew? Look at you, all those stars. His voice was soft, warm, but his grip on the flag tightened, as if anchoring himself against the flood of memory. You made sure I'd grow up with a father, Coleman said, his voice breaking slightly. You made sure my kids had a grandfather. And today, this place dared to tell you, you don't belong? He turned to the crowd, his words a challenge. This man is why we're here. Not your speeches, not your banners. This man who carried his country's weight in his brother's memory and asked for nothing in return. One by one, the officers behind Coleman saluted. Then the veterans in the crowd followed, their hands rising in unison, a silent chorus of respect. Civilians joined in, some placing hands over hearts, others bowing their heads, tears streaking their faces. For the first time in years, Jack stood tall, not as an old man in a worn coat, but as a warrior seen for who he was. A sob broke from a woman nearby, clutching her son's hand. A reporter's voice cracked as she whispered into her microphone, "This is history happening. We've got a ceremony to finish," Coleman said, offering his arm to Jack, "and it's missing its guest of honor." Together they walked through the doors that had barred Jack earlier, the guard stepping aside, his face flushed with shame. Langley tried to speak, stammering an apology, but Coleman silenced him with a glance. "Save it. Listen to a real veteran instead." As they entered the main hall, the crowd erupted in applause, not the polite claps of earlier, but a raw, heartfelt roar. Jack leaned closer to Coleman, his voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't have to do this, son." Coleman's eyes glistened, but his voice was firm. "With all due respect, Chief, I damn well did." By morning, the story was everywhere. Cell phone videos of Coleman's confrontation spread like wildfire across social media, clips of Jack's quiet dignity juxtaposed with the guard's callousness. News anchors choked up, recounting Jack's heroism, his sacrifice, his humility. Langley resigned within 48 hours, citing personal reasons, but the public knew better. The guard issued a public apology, his voice shaking, and was reassigned to desk duty. The Memorials Board, under pressure, announced a sweeping policy change. All who claim veteran status will be welcomed with dignity. Our staff will be trained to honor service in all its forms. Scars, stories, and sacrifice, not just papers. Jack, reluctant in the spotlight, waved off interview requests. "I'm not the story," he said, his voice steady despite the cameras. "There are thousands like me, just quieter." But his image, a frail man clutching a folded flag, standing tall beside a general, struck a chord. Veterans groups saw donations soar, communities rallied, inviting forgotten warriors to share their stories, and at the memorial a new plaque was planned to be unveiled with Jack's name, ensuring no veteran would ever be turned away again. The applause in the National Veterans Memorial's Grand Hall lingered like a heartbeat, raw and pulsing, as John Jack Sullivan stood beside General David Coleman. The crowd's eyes, wet with tears, followed Jack, his frail frame suddenly monumental under the weight of their newfound reverence. His faded navy peacoat, once a mark of his invisibility, now seemed to carry the ghosts of Desert Storm and Afghanistan. The folded flag in his hands, a relic of his brother Tommy's sacrifice, gleamed under the chandeliers, a silent testament to battles fought and brothers lost. But Jack's weathered face, etched with lines of quiet endurance, held no triumph, only a flicker of unease, as if he sensed the story wasn't over. General Coleman guided Jack to a podium draped in red, white, and blue, where the museum director, Edward Langley, had just faltered through his speech. The microphone crackled as Coleman leaned in, his voice steady but heavy with purpose. "This man," he said, gesturing to Jack, "is why we gather today. Not for banners or speeches, but for the truth of service, grit, sacrifice, and the courage to carry on when the world looks away." The crowd erupted again, veterans saluting, civilians clutching their hearts, and reporters scribbling furiously. A young girl in a sparkly dress broke free from her mother's hand, darting forward to press a tiny American flag into Jack's trembling fingers. "Thank you, mister," she whispered, her voice piercing the silence. Jack's eyes glistened, but he only nodded, tucking the flag beside his brother's. Yet, beneath the outpouring of respect, a shadow loomed. Colonel Rachel Harper, standing near the hall's edge, scanned the crowd with a soldier's instinct. Something felt off, a murmur too sharp, a glance too pointed. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from an aide. "Check social media. It's not just praise out there." She slipped into a corner, pulling up X, where the video of Coleman's confrontation was exploding. Millions of views, thousands of comments. Most were heartfelt. "God bless Jack Sullivan. Shame on that guard." But darker threads wove through the noise. Anonymous accounts accusing Jack of faking his service, questioning his medals, even digging into his past. No record of a Sullivan in SEAL Team 3, one post claimed, racking up likes. Rachel's stomach churned. She knew the truth. Jack's bile was ironclad, but she also knew the internet's cruelty could twist a hero into a villain overnight. Inside the hall, Jack took the podium at Coleman's urging, his voice soft but steady. I ain't much for speeches, he began, his drawl pure Virginia grounding the room in its sincerity. I served because it was right. Lost my brother Tommy in Fallujah, lost friends in Kuwait, Kandahar. This flag, he held it up, his hands shaking but resolute, is all I got left of him. I didn't come here for me. I came for them. The crowd hung on every word, some sobbing openly, others gripping their seats as if anchoring themselves against the weight of his loss. A Vietnam vet in the back stood, saluting through tears, his own memories stirred by Jack's quiet strength. But outside, the storm was brewing. Across the plaza, a small group had gathered, their signs hastily scrawled. Verify before you glorify. No ID, no hero. A man in a black hoodie, his face half hidden, shouted into a megaphone, his voice cutting through the wind. We demand proof. Sullivan's a fraud. The words reached Jack through the open doors, faint but sharp, like shrapnel grazing skin. His shoulders tensed, but he kept speaking, his voice unwavering. We don't fight for glory, he said. We fight so folks back home don't have to. That's all I got to say. The applause was deafening, but Rachel caught the flicker of pain in Jack's eyes. He'd heard the accusations. Coleman, sensing the shift, stepped forward, his presence a shield. This ceremony isn't over, he declared. Chief Sullivan will be our guest of honor, and we'll make damn sure he's treated as such. He signaled to his officers, who formed a quiet perimeter around Jack, escorting him to a seat of honor near the front. The choir resumed, their rendition of America the Beautiful soaring, but the harmony felt fragile, undercut by the growing clamor outside. Rachel slipped out, her boots clicking as she approached the protesters. You're disrupting a tribute to a hero, she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. The man in the hoodie smirked. Hero? Where's his proof? We've got sources saying he's a nobody. Rachel's jaw tightened, but she held back. She needed facts, not a fight. Back inside, Jack sat quietly, the tiny flag from the girl now tucked into his coat pocket. He didn't speak of the protesters, didn't mention the venom spreading online. But Coleman, leaning close, saw the weight in his eyes. They're wrong about you, Chief, he said softly. We'll set this straight. Jack nodded, but his gaze drifted to the flag in his lap. Ain't about me, General. Never was. But they tearing into Tommy's name, too. His voice broke. Just for a moment, and Coleman's heart clenched. This wasn't just an attack on Jack. It was an assault on every veteran whose story didn't fit a tidy narrative. As the ceremony drew to a close, a young reporter, her eyes red from crying, approached Jack. Mr. Sullivan, your story's gone viral. People are calling you a national hero, but there's noise out there. Doubters. Will you respond? Jack looked at her, his face weathered but kind. Ma'am, I don't got a computer. No need one. I know what I did. That's enough. His words, simple and raw, hit the crowd like a wave, drawing more tears, more hands over hearts. But the reporter pressed. What about the claims you're not who you say? Jack's eyes met hers, steady as stone. Let 'em talk. Truth don't need a megaphone. Outside, the protesters grew louder, their chants now joined by a news van pulling up, cameras ready to amplify the controversy. Rachel, back at Coleman's side, whispered, Sir, this is getting ugly. I've got people digging into those accounts. Some look like bots, others tied to a local activist with a grudge. But it's spreading fast. Coleman's face hardened. Get me everything. Names, sources, motives. Nobody drags a hero through the mud on my watch. As Jack rose to leave, the crowd parted for him, their applause a living thing, wrapping him in warmth. But as he reached the doors, the chants outside grew clearer. Fraud, fraud. A bottle sailed from the crowd, shattering on the steps just feet from Jack. He didn't flinch, but his grip on the flag tightened, his knuckles white. Coleman's hand shot to his side, steadying him. You're not facing this alone, Chief. he said, his voice a vow. The officers closed ranks, shielding Jack as they moved toward the SUVs. But in that moment, a figure stepped from the shadows. A man in a dark coat, his face obscured, holding a phone that glinted as he recorded. "This ain't over, Sullivan," he called, his voice chillingly calm. Jack turned, meeting the man's gaze, his own eyes steadied despite the tremor in his hands. "Maybe not," he said softly, "but I've faced worse." The crowd gasped, some crying out in anger, others in awe. As Jack climbed into the vehicle, the flag still clutched to his chest. Coleman's jaw was set, his eyes scanning the crowd for the man who had already melted into the chaos. As the SUVs pulled away, sirens silent but lights flashing, Rachel's phone buzzed again. A new post, now trending. Sullivan's past exposed? Dark secrets of a so-called hero? The link led to a grainy photo, Jack's face alongside a document claiming he deserted his unit in Afghanistan. Inside the SUV, Jack stared out the window, the city lights blurring past. Coleman leaned forward. "We'll fight this, Jack. Whatever's coming, you got us." Jack nodded, but his gaze stayed distant, fixed on something only he could see. "It ain't just me they're after," he murmured. "It's all of us who don't fit their story." The vehicle sped into the night, leaving the memorial behind, but the battle for Jack's honor was just beginning, and the truth, whatever it was, hung like a storm on the horizon.